Still looking to earn your invite for the free Players Championship? Visit ppgeventmanagement.com to learn about the different qualifiers available. From one-day events to play-on-your-own-schedule events, all events offer a buyback or cash option along with a 100% credit option redeemable towards any future pre-order at competitive prices. Grinding and getting paid to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Has never been easier. Play with the most professional worldwide tournament series today and join the online community. Come join us on Discord for assistance, info, and even discussions about future events.
Shunping Zhu, have you heard of this player before?
No, why don't you list some of their accolades for me?
I think they topped a locals once potentially. That's about the extent of it, if I remember correctly. Obviously a world's class competitor, playing at the peak of their abilities. Very excited to see what they have brought to the tournament and how far they intend to go with it. So we will be going into that momentarily, and I am very excited to begin commentary on these 9 rounds of discussion.
Yeah, nine rounds. For me, this is pretty standard. I've seen the most of the regions I go to are 9 rounds, and they are always a bit of a slog. So this is going to be very interesting and definitely a real test of the skill here for all of our competitors.
Yeah, for sure. While we are in the game, it is a little difficult for us to find. You have to show profiles specifically. But surprisingly, despite the fact that there were such massive hits to Eldlich and people on www.reddit.com were pronouncing the deck dead, what do you know? Shunping has brought Eldlich.
I don't think that's too much of a surprise. I mean, Eldlich, taking a hit to Scarlet Sanguine does hurt a lot in terms of the overall power level, not being able to tutor out the Golden Lord. And obviously, not being able, Eldlich being a deck all about recycling your resources from the graveyard, that also is a very big hit. But, you know, you still got a lot of good cards in that deck, so I think that's far from a surprise.
Yeah. As you can see, they have foregone the synchro setups in favor of Magician's Souls. Magician's Souls, of course, an extremely powerful card that has been massively represented in Eldlich decks before the hits made to it. The Infinite Impermanence comes down. Obviously very frustrating to see the Infip on the Magician's Souls, but for Eldlich, not that big of a deal. Discarding a White Destiny and a Cursed Eldland, I believe. I'm just loading into this game now.
Yeah, it looks like that is, in fact, the case. Impermanence definitely hurts. Magician Souls does have to discard for cost, so you do lose those cards permanently. However, in the case of Eldlich, not quite so permanent, since most of them will be able to recur themselves. And now we're seeing a Spellbook of Knowledge, so it looks like we're seeing a little bit more of the kind of the builds we saw of Eldlich at the beginning of the format back in April, where Invoked Eldlich was one of the more dominant strategies for this deck. If I had to make a guess, at least.
I was very caught off guard by the amount of people who were in feedback to the list, discounting the possibility of Invoked Eldlich being the best deck, saying things like, "Oh, you hit it too hard with the Scarlet Sanguine nerf." Let me reassure you, this deck is extremely playable, even with only 1 copy of Scarlet. The extremely recursive Invoked engine, plus the ability of Eldlich to just absolutely wall any rogue deck in terms of card advantage and rebuildability. I think you're going to see a huge showing for this deck, even with only 1 copy of Scarlet Sanguine, even without Hauka Fibrax setups.
Yeah, we see it here right off the bat. Firing off all of these consistency cards. Spellbook of Secrets, Grabbing Knowledge, you have Magician's Souls to draw you cards as well. Terraforming gets Meltdown, and you have all this consistency, and all of your cards are pretty much able to recur themselves. Alistair, of course, is able to come back. All of your Eldlich cards, while though you do have 2 significantly powerful ones less available to you, you're still going to be able to play a very long sort of grind game. And if you play all of your interaction correctly, it's one heck of a deck to try and beat over.
Yeah, I mean, this is through a hand trap. Through Infip, we are seeing an Invoked Macabre, an IP Masquerena, the ability to snag another copy of Eldlich from the graveyard for free fodder for the IP Masquerena, turn on any back row that's in our hand. Like, we're going to have negates out the wazoo, even through interaction.
And it's always just so disheartening when you think, even especially when you're forced to do it, because Magician's Souls being so powerful, you really, that is a card that really does force an answer. And when you use that interaction and your opponent is still able to push through a play, especially one that is as powerful as the one we're looking at here, it's just so disheartening because now you have to start with one less card in your hand and you're still staring down the exact same scenario.
You're seeing right here why Invoked was one of the early picks for best Eldlich pair. Magical Meltdown, of course, turning into individual negates on board, but also free fodder for destruction. Eldlich the Golden Lord destroying the Magical Meltdown to bring itself to the field. Fantastic material for IP Masquerena. A great way to keep Conquistador of the Golden Land online. I mean, it just does everything.
Yeah, I feel like I've used the word way too much already, but consistency is the name of the game right here for sure, and we're seeing it in full force.
I'm interested to see what Deska is playing. Deska, of course, a very good player in their own right. A 900 rating on Dueling Book right now. Of course, DB rating is really just a measure of how patient you are against the hordes of Dark Magician players on ladder. But obviously something that high, not enough to scoff at.
Yeah, I mean, fun fact, I actually put my DB rating in my hobby section on my resume, and that's been very helpful for me recently.
Oh yeah, I will say if I was a hiring manager and I looked at your resume, if you have a quadruple-digit DB rating, I'm like, now there's an individual who is willing to deal with anything.
Yeah, I mean, let's think about it. You know, it shows resourcefulness, problem solving.
Yeah, of course.
Problem de-escalation. There's community management. There's so many valuable qualities you can get from this.
If you don't lead your service job with high issue, what are you really doing?
And we've seen this a lot, actually. Yeah, we've seen this a lot where players, you'll notice it especially at these highest levels of play, Lightning Storm being such a common both sideboard and, in a lot of cases, a main deck card. We've seen people putting all of their monsters in defense position here in order to successfully play around it. However, I'm assuming this Lightning Storm is declaring onto, actually it says, I see a
declaring monster.
It isn't
so crusty. Forcing the activation of Masquerena before the end of the main phase, and it would interact with anything particularly. That's very interesting. Usually the way you get rid of Masquerena is by summoning a monster and threatening an attack. But doing that turns on the Conquistador in a very positive way. This forces a tag out of the Masquerena with the Eldlich the Golden Lord, which will turn off the ability to pop things with Conquistador, or something like a Secure Gardna as the pick instead. All right, looks like the Conquistador is coming out on the Trickstar Light stage here.
Trickstar Light Stage, yeah, man, haven't seen that card in a while, so I'm really interested in seeing, most likely an engine card, I'm assuming. Light Stage usually used for Candina, Trickstar Candina, and Trickstar Corobane to sort of give you a quick turbo into a Link 2. It does force out the Conquistador, and now you just have to find a way to get through this Mekka here as the Corobane comes down onto the board. And really interesting. Go ahead.
No, it's so close. 2K just not enough. You got to be able to get over a 3100, and unsurprisingly, this strategy is being paired with Mekk-Knight. Blue Sky is just about the most powerful there is, and I assume we'll Fiend a Negate here.
Most likely. Yeah, the Mekk-Knight engine is one of those, it's just so powerful, very consistent as well. I like the tech of the Trickstar Light Stage. I want to assume, it's a little bit of a hard read, but I want to assume that the Candy and the Corobane are most likely aiming to make Predaplant Verte Anaconda to then send the Neos fusion to access the Rainbow Neos.
It's absolutely correct.
Yeah.
I would be surprised if they were doing anything else. Sampai, who is responsible for a lot of Mekk-Knight Invoked theory, has been very vocal about the inclusion of Trickstars in the build. They're just fantastic as link material to force negates, to lock back row before you summon something into the column. I mean, it just does everything.
Definitely would have been great in this scenario, but unfortunately just one too many pieces of interaction here. Do you think... hindsight a little bit 2020, do you think going for the back row of the Lightning Storm, do you think that might have been better to try and push your Trickstar Light Stage through? Because the Rainbow Neos probably would have been good enough to try and win this game on its own.
Arguable. You know, if you're not able to the Masquerena, it probably represents a pop in its own right. The Macabre staying on field just seems like the absolute nail in the coffin for any strategy. But oh my gosh, an Invocation coming down using its opponent's copy of A-Lister now that it's in the graveyard. Hakero, the response, to do what?
I believe they want to banish graveyard. Yeah.
Oh, you can ban. It's not DD Crow. You can banish either graveyard. So A-Lister now banished. There's no relevant target for the Invocation, and there goes the game.
I mean, that is just the definition of heads up, knowing what your cards do. Just smart gameplay. I mean, they played around everything. They had a backup plan for everything, just based off solely what the entire deck could provide. A negate Mekka, an interaction with IP Masquerena that can also protect from destruction. Conquistador Pop, Quaquero completely outplaying the Invocation. And I will say credit to Deska, though, for knowing that interaction, because I feel like a lot of people don't know you can use your opponent's Alistair and their own graveyard to banish for your own fusion summon.
Yeah, hilarious in Mirrors. Mirrors specifically end up taking an unbelievable turn because of this. I will say, excited to see Mekk-Knight represented at all. You know, Mekk-Knight is a subset of monsters that are extremely powerful. They've seen a lot of success with Invoked specifically, but like so many archetypes, they are just under the power level necessary to compete with the top two decks. And as you saw in this game, even a nerfed version of Eldlich kind of dispatches with it with ease.
It is a deck. Mekk-Knights are so interesting to rate because you largely see them as an engine in almost every single thing they're played in. And I remember last week we saw them paired with a Sub-Terror deck. And sort of as a way to... It seemed like they wanted it as a way to supplement the small bodies that the Sub-Terror monsters have, just to give more resources, more attack points, and so on and so forth. And it was very unique, and I really like that interaction with the deck of always being able to... It can almost make any archetype better if you include it in there.
It looks like we have made it into Game 2, and unsurprisingly, the Eldlich player has been allowed to go first. The A-Lister coming down and being met with an infinite impermanence. That's just about as good as it gets, but as you know, any competent Eldlich player will just... or the Invoker player has already drawn the Invocation, I'm sure.
Man, just bring it back. I can't remember the last time I saw an Alistair actually resolve, and I also can't remember the last time I saw the Invoked player not care and just have the Invocation anyway.
This is a little crustier than usual. The A-Lister does translate into a good send for Spellbook of Knowledge, but without going through the Salamangreat Almirage and the Secure Garden, you're not going to have a light in Graveyard. So you're not only going to have to have drawn the Invocation, you're also going to have to have drawn like an Eldlich.
Yeah, Golden Lord, trying to think here. If you do have access to Magician Souls that can get there by sending, I believe they are playing Mana, the Palladium Oracle, or hard drawing that card as well will also work to still get out your Invoked Mekka.
Mana is just the worst card that is seeing play right now. I cannot fathom how this is the best we have at our disposal. But of course, it is a light, relevant for A-Lister, the Invoker, and it does fulfill Magician Soul's condition. And look, just set 2 paths. This is a very beatable board.
That it is. It's one of those weird scenarios where you think if you don't have a lot of plays available, especially not many up against Lightning Storm, do you almost pass on nothing against the Mekk-Knight player? Well, then again, I suppose if you're playing Invoked, you don't really have a whole lot of board-breaking tools.
Yeah, it's Eldlich is in a position where, against any Mekk-Knight player, you do want to be passing on nothing if they interrupt your main play, but you really can't afford to as Eldlich. You know, it takes a couple of turns to get your plays off the ground. You're seeing here the Lightning Storm cleared the back row, and honestly, if I'm in Shunping Zhu's shoes, I'm pretty happy about that. I was able to get the Hakero into the graveyard without my opponent doing anything, and looks like as the Meltdown is met with an Ash, the turn will end.
As I've been messing around with the Mekk-Knight deck quite a bit recently, and Lightning Storm is one of those weird cards in the deck, specifically for a scenario like this. In a case where they do have a purple or a blue in hand, this is where you get stuck. You've Lightning Stormed your opponent, completely eliminating columns, and now you just pass on a Meltdown getting ashed, and that's all you can do. And now you have to wait here as Quaquero is, like you said, is loaded, and they still have access. Assuming they can find another copy of Alistair, their own Meltdown, it's really reached its boiling point here as to whether or not you can hold back the Eldlich player.
And unsurprisingly, an Eldlich in hand. That's what hands that do very little look like. Looking on cost real quick, with the Scarlet Sanguine at one individual copy, it's kind of difficult to decide what you want to be discarding because you really only have the one mechanism of getting Eldlich from your deck.
Yeah, I kind of wonder how players are sort of replacing those copies of Scarlet. Naturally, you're probably bumping up to one, maybe two copies of the White Destiny, but then I wonder, do you maybe do a 2-and-2 ratio, looking at more copies of Black Awakening? I'm really interested in seeing how players build their decks today and sort of circumvent that problem of two less Scarlet Sanguine.
Oh, another unexciting turn from the Eldlich player. We're going to activate Haketo at end step. Banish that I expect for the one copy of Scarlet Sanguine. That's going to be set. There's an Eldlich available at this point, but there's also columns available for the Mekk-Knight player.
So if we have to make a guess on their hand based on their last turn, I assume there probably is at least one Knight in the hand. Nothing in standby here, so we're going to see some action for sure. This is
another meltdown, honestly. I mean, as you had divined, here comes the Mekk-Knight.
Now, normally these builds, they may have changed since my experience with the deck is a couple months out of date. Usually 3 purple, 2 blue, and then 1 copy of Indigo with potentially a tech on Yellow Star or Red Moon. So we're really hoping to see either a blue or purple here.
Here comes blue, as you expected. I've seen people even shaving individual copies of blue. Blue is in such a weird state where if it gets to draw 2 cards, you literally win the game, but that never happens. We're going to activate Conquistador as Chainlink 2 and Sanguine as Chainlink 3. No Ash, please. That would really screw up this combo.
Now, interesting to note here, because the Conquistador, with the new rules being treated as a trap monster, leaves the spell and trap card zone. So even if there was an Ash, which unfortunately there isn't, the Conquistador could move itself out of a column on resolution, meaning the blue sky would not search anything.
Ooh, that's kind of cute. And looks like we are going to destroy the blue sky here. We've got an Eldlich on the field and a Conquistador as well. I hope that set card is something relevant, because otherwise this might be the end of the turn again.
Yeah, sadly, a bit of a slow game, but we are going to move to end phase, and that's going to give access to the second copy of YuGiOh, which... And now we'll get to see, is it going to be a Black Awakening or a White Destiny?
I think White Destiny is probably the pick with the Eldlich in the graveyard. You can fire it as quick as you would like, and then depending on the contents of the extra deck, you can go into a Gustav Max and a Liba.
I would be surprised to see 3 copies of Golden Lord in an Invoked Eldlich deck, especially given that your best card for pulling that card out of the deck is currently sitting at 1 copy in this particular event. But I stand corrected. They do go for Black Awakening anyway.
I was going to say, I think you probably do have to play multiple copies. You know, a lack of Scarlet Sanguine means that it's more important than ever that you're able to find the Golden Lords and send them for invocation. And of course, they are your recursive monster threat, even if they are a little bit bricky on occasion.
Yeah. Their stat line is rather impressive as well, especially after the graveyard effect goes off.
Well, they're big old boys.
Oh, yeah. I mean, even in this scenario, as we're looking at it, Golden Lord can send either the Black Awakening or the Conquistador currently on board to graveyard. You swing in for 35 and 25 and make Gustav Max, and that is, in fact, game on board.
Yeah, I don't know the contents of their extra deck. Obviously, a bunch of Eldlich decks started shaving the trains as they became less powerful in the wake of synchro strategies. But I would not be surprised if we saw stuff like Gustav Max creeping back into extra decks when all you really have to devote space for is the individual copies of Invoked fusions.
Yeah, we did. As the strategy shifts back to the Invoked build, I kind of wonder if there are any tricks people picked up along the way as the meta has sort of developed, and where we may see something a little bit crazier. But unfortunately, the pool of rank 10 Xyzs are hilariously small.
This is Sky Palace Gargrangi Erasure, and I will not stand for it.
All right, that's 2K left for Deska. We're seeing the extra deck. And are we going to see a bang bang?
And this would be a quick 2-0 for Shunping Su, and I think particularly surprising that a world-class competitor picked up game one, even with a deck that many people were saying was absolutely dead under this new ban list.
Yeah, I mean, I think this match is actually a perfect example of seeing where the strengths of the Invoked Eldlich deck still are, how strong it really is, and also still showing the ever-present flaws of, unfortunately, the Invoked Mekk-Knight strategy.
Yeah.
Still kind of taking their time to think about it. I wonder what the consideration might be here.
I mean, I figure if you had Gustav, you just go for it, right?
I can't imagine a scenario where I have waited longer than 10 seconds to put that card in the board, but I haven't gone to Worlds, so, you know.
How are we doing in time? We've got 20 minutes remaining.
Oh.
You spend 20 minutes thinking about this decision?
Interesting. Decides to play it safe. Maybe they picked up some tricks along the way. No trains in the extra deck, and instead have decided to take an IP Masquerena.
Now I'm really curious. So we're going to activate this copy of Elixir of Black Awakening afterwards, getting the remaining Eldlich from the deck. Now we've got material for the Masquerena, and we cannot summon anything but zombies for the remainder of the turn, though I doubt that matters.
Unfortunately, Black Awakening does have to summon in defense position, so that, again, was just a little bit... One of those weird lines of text on the card that just makes it a little bit too bad to help you out a whole lot of times.
And notably, Elixir of Black Awakening is the Elixir that was being cut in modern versions of the deck. It's just too slow, it doesn't do enough. You'd rather be playing maxed copies of Scarlet Sanguine and maybe one of White Destiny, if any.
Yeah, that was typically the ratio we're seeing. Usually your Elixirs consisted of 3 Scarlet and then pretty much your own choice there. And as we head to end phase, we're seeing a White Destiny set. I believe there was a Conquistador banished as well. That got the White Destiny, and a Scarlet Sanguine is being banished to grab.
I don't like the counter trap here.
Counter trap would actually. I actually would have liked that play a bit. The game state is so simplified that having that Omni negate, and then still, of course, being able to have recursion and White Destiny to still make your IP Masquerade alive would have been quite powerful. But Conquistador under IP Masquerade is also quite powerful, and they do still have that one card in hand to potentially go into something like a Nightmare or Unicorn or Phoenix and really shut down any potential plays they have here outside of impermanence.
This is a start. It's going to prompt the Masquerena. Looks like... Oh no, because you can only activate it in main phase. Wow, that's clever. Alright, so instead, that Masquerena is completely dead. Can a Mekk-Knight player OTK over an 800 attack Masquerena end of main phase? Oh.
This is one of the more powerful cards against the Eldlich strategy for sure. Now, usually when your opponent declares end of main phase, or you find yourself in the start step of battle, that's when you want to flip any of your relevant Elixers and cards like that, because at least in that scenario you can get them into the graveyard and still try to keep your engine rolling here, and I think that's what Shunping is going to look to do here.
So Conquistador of the Golden Land can pop a face-up card. So if Shunping wants to, they can White Destiny back one of their Eldliches, so the White Destiny ends up in the graveyard, fire off Conquistador to destroy one of the Eldliches so that it ends up in the graveyard, but, you know, that's a little big brain. Probably better to just keep what's necessary against the evenly matched.
We do see the evenly matched come down.
Kind of like the White Destiny as the keep.
It's hard to say in this scenario, huh?
Yeah, regardless, you're going to fire off this copy of Conquistador, so this Eldlich goes to the graveyard.
And I think they are going to go with your line of play, removing their own Golden Lord, most likely, to keep all the
they're going to pop
itself. Pop itself, interesting. And
hilarious.
Then most likely,
and White the keep.
And again, that's why I'm only on the mic, so...
And looks like Deska has no follow-up. Rainbow Dragon in the hand and Elemental.
Wow.
It's so frustrating. Where's the polymerization? Oh,
so unfortunate.
Ow. And Shunping walking off with a first-round victory versus a deck that was scraping the edges of contention with a deck. Hey everyone, if you're enjoying the coverage of the Pro Play Tour Online series, just remember, you can play in one yourself. Every Thursday you can enter our free weekly 64-player tournament with invites to the entire Top Cut. Every Saturday is our weekend championship, where you can enter a YCS-type event with 100% payout and even a cash payout option. The more players, the bigger the prizes. Can't commit time to play in our one-day events? We also host multiple 8-man pods daily, ready to fire on demand on your own schedule. All these events award invites to our free invite-only Players Championship with prizes supplied by our sponsors. For more information, visit ppgeventmanagement.com and come play with the pros.